Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. This is part 2 of our 3-part series with Dr. Chris H. Hardy on the infinite spiral staircase. In this segment, we're going to focus in on semantic field theory. Dr. Hardy is a psychological anthropologist and a systems theorist. She is a former parapsychology researcher at the Psychophysical Research Laboratory in Princeton, New Jersey, and she is the author of several books, including Cosmic DNA at the Origin, The Sacred Network, and Networks of Meaning. Welcome again, Chris.
Welcome, Jeff.
It's good to be with you once more. In our first segment, we focused quite a bit on your experiences in your youth, living and traveling as a sadhu with no money, entering into very high meditative states, and experiencing what you called telepathic harmonic fields. And we also touched upon a subsequent development in your thinking at that time, the idea of the semantic field, of which the telepathic harmonic field is, I guess you could say, a
subset.
A subset, exactly, yeah. So at some point in your development, as you're having all of these remarkable mystical experiences and psychic experiences, and at the same time developing theoretical ideas of your own about them, you had the instinct or the impulse to enter into a scientific career.
Yes, definitely. I was guided by dreams to do that.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I had already written 2 books, especially on my own experiences,
yes,
on anomalous experiences,
mm-hmm,
on meditation. And I felt that, my whole life has been geared toward trying to understand the nature of the ultimate reality,
mm-hmm. I
which
want
is
to
consciousness.
say that I find this especially fascinating because in my own career as a parapsychologist, I was guided by dreams as well. And the very notion that a dream could guide somebody through to a lifelong career, this is something you
Absolutely.
and I share, I think is related to your concept of the semantic field itself.
Yes, in a sense, yes, because semantic field theory is the only way that I could make sense of some of my experiences, even
mm-hmm.
on the road, traveling, because the whole place, as we said about the town of the Nasik, for
yes,
example,
one of the sacred towns
yes,
in India.
The whole place is imprinted by the energy of consciousness of sadhus and meditators who have been there for thousands of years, those
mm-hmm.
sacred towns in India. And you have the same thing with the megalith, for example, in Europe.
Yes.
Those stone monuments are imprinted with the energy of consciousness
mm-hmm.
of all the people who have prayed or meditated in those places.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a sense that the consciousness is an energy. When we observe those fields, in a experimental setting,
yes.
But
in a parapsychology laboratory, for example.
And also when we observe, when we study consciousness in laboratories, in Psy research laboratories, we are able to find out and to demonstrate that Psy is not stopped by by shielding that normally would stop electromagnetic energies.
Now, psi, for any viewer who is not familiar, is the term that parapsychologists use to describe everything they study, meaning extrasensory perception and psychokinesis.
Yes, telepathy, precognition. So you have studies that demonstrate that psi, being a mental capacity, for the parapsychologist, I must explain that psi is not an energy. But for me, but for everybody accept that psi is a mental phenomena.
Yes.
So it's part of mind and consciousness.
It's a mental phenomenon.
Yes, it's a mental consciousness phenomena. And we are able to demonstrate that it is not stopped by what is stopping normally electromagnetic energy.
Right.
Like you can have telepathic experiment with a submarine at the bottom of the ocean, which normally the electromagnetic energy is not passing.
Yes.
You can have also information coming from the future, so you have a displacement in time. So we say that consciousness, psi is proving that consciousness is not constrained by space or by time.
We exist in space and time, but we're not constrained by it.
Yes, our mind, our consciousness is not constrained by space and time. It's evident in my semantic field theory. I have made the link between the way consciousness is organizing itself in those sub-constellation, you know. I mean, the semantic field is the whole consciousness, the whole mind of the person, and it has many subsets.
Subsets.
You know.
It's similar, I suppose, to some of Carl Jung's thinking about the collective unconscious.
At a certain, yes, when you look, if you imagine that each one of us has a consciousness field, which is the semantic field, okay? It's our consciousness. At the same time, each part of our body, for example, has its own consciousness, and it has its own small field inside the big field. So each person has a semantic field that is totally coupled with the body, and also the body consciousness, but it has a layer that is independent, that is not bound or constrained by space and time. So it is at the same time rooted in the body and in matter, in our physical world, and at the same time it has a dimension that is outside space-time, you know?
So in effect, what you're saying is that the human being, we live in our bodies, we have a birth and a death, we have a history in space and time, but we partake of a much larger reality.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So to get back to what you were saying about Carl Jung collective unconscious, when you imagine that all the people, you know, have this semantic field, which is partly outside space and time in an extra dimension. So if you take the ensemble of all the souls or the self with a great S of those semantic field of each person, you know, and you take the totality of them,
billions of people,
on Earth, then you have a collective unconscious. You have an extra dimension outside of space-time, which is the dimension of the collective unconscious, or what Teilhard de Chardin was calling noosphere.
The noosphere, yes.
And you have cosmic consciousness in the Eastern religions.
Now, Carl Jung also developed the theory of synchronicity, and he did so working with a great Nobel laureate physicist, Wolfgang Pauli. And the theory of synchronicity seems to be related to the semantic fields, because it's as if there's meaning embodied in the universe itself that is responsible for events coming together in uncannily meaningful ways.
Absolutely, yes. It's like this theory of semantic field is able to explain synchronicities, because in synchronicity, what do you have? Let's take an example. Carl Jung, best example is he had a patient in his, and this patient was totally blocked. He was trying to work with her for months and months, and she was not budging. She was not getting free from her trauma. And at one point, this patient, a woman, was describing that she had a dream about a golden scarab, and that's the very precise instant that she was talking about this golden scarab. By the window, which was slightly open, came in a golden glowing scarab.
A scarab.
No, a scarab which has this green, goldish, and in the light of the sun, it is exactly perfectly gold color.
The scarab, golden scarab, is a sacred animal in Egyptian mythology, but not particularly common in Switzerland, where
well, you have those green scarabs everywhere in Europe, and in the light of the sun, they look like absolutely gold.
I see.
Yes.
So it was. So the timing.
It's a copper color.
The timing of that event with her recounting her dream, and did it lead to a breakthrough in the psychotherapy?
Yeah, exactly. So this is the example. Carl Jung was basing himself on psi phenomena. He was already very knowing about the work of Rhine,
Yes.
The first work in parapsychology, and so he was basing his synchronicity to say that it was a coincidence, but a meaningful one, between the mind state of a person and an event that would happen outside.
Yes.
But when you reflect on that, it means that an event which is also has a physical aspect to it, and also, of course, also a psychological interpretation of whatever happens, you know. But it has a psychological aspect and a physical aspect. Like the golden scarab is the scarab coming in the room, and at the same time the interpretation for the patient that, oh, this is such a meaningful sign.
Yes.
Okay, so you have those two. And in semantic field theory, not only we as a human being, we have a self with a big S, which is our soul, which is outside space-time, but all the objects in the universe, like nature, animals, trees, mountains, landscape, they have this dimension of the semantic field, which is the organization, you know, a semantic field which is outside space-time.
Yes, outside of space and time. But isn't it another way of looking at it to simply say, well, the whole universe is intelligent, is conscious?
Yes.
Everything is conscious, which is not so different from the animistic viewpoint of primitive people everywhere.
Oh, not only animistic, but in all ancient culture, even in Eastern religions, you have this understanding that the beings, all beings, the plants have a certain type of consciousness. You find this also in South America, in the shamanism everywhere, in Eastern religion, that there is an aspect of consciousness which is inside any kind of system, entity, whether it's a plant or an animal. Now we have this in psychology. You had those wonderful interviews with Stuart Hameroff.
Yes, indeed.
And he was also referring to Chalmers, a philosopher.
David Chalmers, philosopher of mind, yes.
Yes, who is having this saying that there is a proto-consciousness in anything, any object, any being in the universe. And Roger Penrose is also into this type of framework.
Many physicists, Roger Penrose is a great mathematical physicist, but he is one of many who are probing this area. It's very, very significant now, and the fact that you're able to take your work in semantic field theory and link it into cosmology and physics, which will be the topic of our third interview coming up, suggests that you're able to really find the links between, in effect, ancient philosophies and the most up-to-date notions today in quantum theory and in cosmology. That must be very exciting.
Yes, because I started by cognitive theory with semantic field theory.
Yes.
And because I understood from experience and from the research being done in the lab, in the Psy lab, that the consciousness was in fact an energy. Why? Because the way energy is defined in physics, it is what is able to provoke some work.
Yes.
You know, this is a definition of energy. But when you have a psi phenomena like healing, which is a definite effect of mind over a body.
Distant healing.
Yes, about over biological organism.
Yes, some people would call it psychokinesis on a biological...
Bio-PK.
Bio-PK.
Yes. And it has been done, the experiments have been done with hundreds of them.
Oh, yes, PK being the abbreviation for psychokinesis or mind over matter.
Yes, so bio-PK, psychokinesis over biological matter.
Yes.
And hundreds of experiments have been done, and they show that the mind is able to influence small organisms that are not prone to receive suggestion.
For example, bacteria.
Yes,
or
bacteria, plants,
or mice.
Yes, electric fishes, and when you have this capacity of the mind to influence biosystems, I mean biological systems, organism, you have a work that is done because you are modifying something in a matter system, even if it is an organism, even if it is biological matter, it is still space-time matter, you know. So it is belonging to the definition of an energy. So consciousness is an energy.
It's an energy that has a component outside of space and time, but is able to interact inside of space and time.
Exactly, exactly. Like our consciousnesses are able to do that, and if we are in this framework that we give a proto-consciousness to any plant or living system or even physical system,
even
in
a
the universe.
Subatomic particle.
Yes, yes, as I do in this infinite spiral staircase.
Yes, and in philosophy, this is known as the theory of panpsychism.
Exactly.
Incidentally, so you would consider yourself a panpsychist.
Oh, definitely. Yes, but it has let's say that of course I have my brand of
your own
framework. You
yes,
know,
which
theory.
is the infinite spiral staircase that we are discussing in this three-part series of interviews.
Yes. So I go back to what we were saying about synchronicity.
Yes.
When you have a theory that is understanding that any biological system, like a forest, take a forest, you have all the animals, like the ants, the trees, and also the plants, the trees, all the animals living in the forest, they have their own collective semantic field. And then you have the trees, and then you have the human being living in the village inside the forest. So you have semantic field of collectivities within semantic field.
Yes.
And all co-creating the semantic field of the forest. And all of them, they are able to interact via the beyond space-time, the semantic dimension, you know, where they are beyond space and time.
And it's interesting that you mention it as a forest, because one assumes that the creatures and the plants of the forest don't use language the way we humans do. And normally we think of semantics as related to human language.
No, but I take it really to its Greek root, which means the creation of meaning. Now, if you have an ant has no brain, it has only neuronal nexus, you know.
Yes.
But if you take a colony of ants, for example, they have their own path to go to their prey, and they have their own path with sense, you know, which goes to their nest. And so this path is totally different in terms of meaning for the ants than the other path. So their whole territory around their ant nest is a semantic. It's a lot of
It's
meanings.
full of meaning even without language.
Differentiated meanings, and it's wholly organized. And then they have their enemies, you know, and all this. So that's it for me. For any system in the universe, there is this layer of organization, which is pure semantic energy. And semantic energy is also larger than consciousness, because it includes any kind of very primitive type of recognition. It's just recognition.
And I suppose you could think of semantic fields also in terms of human sociology.
Oh yes, definitely collective semantic field. And then we get to the very particular semantic field, which are field of oneness, harmony, which are the telepathic harmony, harmonic field that we talked last time.
Yes, indeed. So the key for me in terms of pinning down the semantic field theory as a true scientific theory is to work out how we go from meaning outside of space and time to influencing actions or work, as you called it, within space and time.
But this is where the theory is very interesting. I'm sorry to say that, but it's like there is an absolute impossibility for a mind that would be only information to have an actual action over a physical system. But if, because you cannot have information apart from a physical cause, you know, like you push a button and then it starts the electricity.
I mean, computers process information and they can operate physical systems.
Yes, but computers have been conceived, and the programs that are operating the mechanism have been conceived by a mind
with a semantic field, with a purpose.
So, but if you did not have a program, you know, you would not have any action, and then it's totally causal. Okay, so with the semantic field theory, we don't have the problem because we have the interaction happening at the level of the semantic field. So it's not like I am able to change the organization of an organ when I do some healing,
Yes.
for example, but it is that my consciousness, my semantic field, is interacting with the semantic field of this organism, or of this organ. And now, as the semantic field is informational, you know, it's full of meaning and information, then it is this information which is interacting with information. It is the same interacting with the same. And this, the field, the semantic field of this animal or organism or body is going to interact with its own body. And now the action is perfectly understandable in terms of science, because you have the same interacting with the same, and each one is strongly coupled with the body. So if you send to the other person an information, like a positive thinking about his own health, you know, his own getting healed, for example, then his own field is going to create the process of healing.
Yes. Well, it has occurred to me that there's a sense, I think, in which people viewing this videotape may be partaking of a telepathic harmonic field interaction with us right now.
I hope so. I really hope so.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
That would be wonderful, and it may also be a deeper way to help communicate these ideas. I can say that I think your semantic field theory is a very important step forward for parapsychology researchers to try and explain the amazing and sometimes bizarre phenomenon that they study. Well, Chris H. Hardy, thank you so much for once again sharing another half hour with me.
Thank you so much, too. Yeah.
And thank you for being with us. Be sure to check your listings for part 3 of our 3-part interview series on the infinite spiral staircase. In part 3, we will begin to explore the notion of cosmic DNA at the origin.